Hello and welcome back to NAS Compares, and it's myself Robbie here, and I want to talk you through how to set up your new Thunderbolt NAS so you can get to your photo editing, your video editing, or whatever it is that you plan to use your system for. But before we go through today's video, a few disclaimers straight off the bat. Number one, I am connected to this NAS via Thunderbolt. That's the whole point of this video. We're going for a Thunderbolt connection, but unfortunately the Thunderbolt 4 cable I'm utilizing right now is approximately 50 centimeters long, so I'm quite close to the system. So unfortunately you will hear a little bit of ambient noise of the system during operation. Next up, as you can see from here on screen, I've got the NAS here all set up, and you can also see if I go to the network connections, I am connected via Thunderbolt. You'll be able to see that I've already set up a lot of this device. This guide is for people that have already set up the device and the provisional storage for the first time. So if you've not already set up the connection, installed the latest firmware, set up your storage arrays, then if you haven't done that, I recommend doing the following. One, it will be linked in the description. Find my NAS setup guide. Even the 2022 version will guide you through all of the hardware, all of the software setup, all of the software, all of the storage pools, all of the caching, everything, and it will guide you through all of those steps. It's not a short video, but it will do all of that for you. Likewise, if you're a video editor, use my video editing guide for QNAP NAS for general tips and guidance on how to set up and create certain files and folders and storage that will be useful in the storage setup of your video editing NAS. Not just on Thunderbolt, but just generally. And finally, to learn more about the software that's running on this new system, you can go ahead and look at my QUTS review or Google QTS review for both my written breakdown guide and go ahead for the video guide there. There's loads of ways, but it's just very important that you make your way to, at the very least, the setup of the desktop for the rest of this video, as well as setting up your storage. So, along the bottom of the screen you're going to see chapters, because there are different ways to set this device up for use in your video or photo editing setup over Thunderbolt. Now the tools that you're definitely going to need for this video, head over to QNAP Essentials page here, and the tools you're going to need to download is one, QFinder Pro, an app you've almost certainly already installed to find the NAS on your local area network, and the other one is an app called QSync. Now you may not need that, but at the bottom of the screen you'll see those chapters, and at one of these chapters I'm going to talk about the utility of using QSync over both Thunderbolt and just generally over the network environment. There's loads of other tools you can use to make the most of your NAS system, but for now I would just recommend using that tool. So for now we head back in. Now when you connect the NAS for the first time to your local to your Thunderbolt connected system via Thunderbolt cable, go ahead and use the QNAP QFinder Pro software. Open that application up, make sure it's installed, and then click the refresh. That will scan your local area network for connected devices, and as you can see there is our TVS H874T. Now there's the Thunderbolt symbol there. That Thunderbolt symbol indicates that is visible on Thunderbolt. Or if you click the down arrow, there'll be another one for how it's accessed over the local area network. Now, don't worry about it opening up that window, it's just because we're going in the tool. Now, if you've connected this device over Thunderbolt for the first time, you should see a screen that looks like this. Here on screen you'll see this window that indicates that it's asking you to connect with this system via a certain protocol. Now if you haven't seen this window on your screen when you've connected on Thunderbolt, just highlight the NAS you want to connect with and then select network drives. Network drives, you can see select IP address and make sure it's selected Thunderbolt. Next, the protocol. Unless you know what you're doing and you're going to be using FTP servers, I recommend leaving it at SMB. It's a widely regarded and used connected protocol. Select that there and then click OK. Now it may invite you to add the password. I've already done it, but if it asks you to put the password in, just enter the credentials for your NAS and you'll be presented with all of the network drives. Now these network drives are the shared folders you've got on your QNAP NAS. So say for example you want to make sure you've got a folder on your QNAP NAS that's going to be utilized over Thunderbolt. Go ahead into File Station on the QNAP, select Shared Folder, and then from Shared Folder give the folder a name. We're going to call this Share Test. Then choose where in the NAS you want it located. So once again, as invited earlier on, make sure you've gone through the setup guide and set up the folders, the storage areas on your NAS, and choose an appropriate storage area. What do I mean by appropriate? Well, when you created your storage areas, you may be utilizing an area built up with hard drives. You may be using an area built up with SSDs. Whichever area and storage space that you've created in order to edit on the NAS on the fly, that's the fastest. In this case, it could be the M.2 NVMe that I've got here inside the system. Make sure that that is, in my case, storage pool 3, where you put your new shared folder. So as you can see, we're going to select storage pool 3. We've created our share test, and from here, don't worry too much about provisioning unless you know what you're doing and you wish to expand later, as thin provisioning will largely suit most users. Next, go ahead and put the tick next to enable snapshots if you want to make sure that regular snapshots are created of this folder for you to retain and restore in the event that you need to rectify any kind of errors. And that is more to do with long-term storage blueprints than anything else. Again, most of these concepts are explained in greater detail on my guide and overall walkthrough of the software. From here at the bottom, choose whether you want to use folder encryption. Encryption will mean that the folder will have a login credential needed in order to access it externally, or if the drives are enabled. But bear in mind that a local key within the QNAP will be kept for mounting and unmounting. If you don't know what you're doing, you can leave that unticked. As you can see, the thin snapshot there is because it won't be able to guarantee shared space, guaranteed expansion space later on. Ultimately, it means that using thin provisioning will not allow you to expand that folder later on. This isn't to be confused with getting expanded storage at the pool level. Again, the guide will tell you more. From here, you can choose some of the inbuilt options. So for example, data reduction will allow you to compress data live and on the fly as it's written into the shared folder to save system space. Deduplication will mean that if you are sending files over from multiple locations, but it's the same data, it will only keep one copy but a record of where it comes from. But a really important option is going to be this one, the block size. Now, depending on how you're going to interact with this NAS over Thunderbolt, be it video files, if you're going to be running virtual machines, or they're going to be exceedingly high frequency but low volume files, such as tiny metadata, select the appropriate block size for that data, because that will change the performance. If you're going to be editing videos or photos, I strongly recommend selecting 128K. Finally, worm settings, or write once, read many. This will allow you to ensure that data that's being sent to the NAS is unchangeable, either for a certain period of time or for perpetuity. That prevents you from things like ransomware trying to alter your data and extort you for money, but it also ensures that any work that you send to the NAS can't be edited afterwards. It can only be added to. It can't be deleted, it can't be changed, and that's very useful for something called immutable backups, which allow you, when data is being sent to this system, to not allow it to be changed and accidentally ruin your data. And again, you can change the retention policies and how long edits can be made for before they are closed. And again, you can change it so that either no one can edit these files or admins can change those files. Now zooming out, we'll carry on and we choose who can access it. It's recommended, if you are going to be editing video on the system, to never ever use the admin account. Go ahead into the control panel and create yourself a brand new user for editing. In control panel, click create, select create new user, call this person editor or editor1, whatever suits you. Give them a password if you choose, and then that user will be the user who you will use for video editing over Thunderbolt. You don't have to do this, but it will result in ensuring that if your PC or Mac got compromised with malware or ransomware, you can ensure that this user can only access the folders you want to give them. It will allow you to ensure that that user, if they do become compromised, the only thing they can edit is the folder you give them access to. You can even ensure that they can read the data, but they can't write any data, and you can even deny them access to more important directories when you create that user. heading back into the shared folder, we can go ahead once you've selected your user and choose the appropriate level of access, click Next. These options you can largely leave as is, but if you want to know what you're doing with regards to synchronization, multiple sharing and more, or you want to go for lock files, which is quite useful for if you've got multiple people accessing the same file at once, or using that file for a Apple Time Machine backup over Thunderbolt, there's options there for you. But for now, go ahead and confirm those steps, and we've now created a shared folder here on the NAS that will allow us to utilize that map service option we were using earlier on. Now heading back into QFinder, we can carry on with where we are up to with assigning to those map network drives. Right now, if we refresh this list, we can see that the drive we created earlier, Share Test, is now visible. Right click, go to the bottom and map network drive. Give the drive a letter, in this case I'm going to give it the letter M, click finish, and as you can see, now my PC has got that folder here. If we go ahead, go into that folder, and I'll go into, say, my pictures folder here. I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop a couple of files. We can see I've drag and dropped them via my local Windows Explorer, and if we head into the QNAP, open up that folder we've just created, here, Share Test, and as you can see, on the QNAP, those files I've sent are here. Now, using a mapped network drive is by far the easiest way in which you can communicate with the NAS over Thunderbolt and for your editing purposes. However, there are some applications for video editing that don't play nice with mapped network drives. They will look at these and see them as external storage, and you won't be able, although you'll be able to see them on your Mac or Windows system, your video or photo editing software will not be able to communicate them, Thunderbolt or network. And that is where this comes in. These are known as logical drives. They are drives that the system thinks are exactly the same as your operating system drive or a locally connected storage drive, even though you're connecting to them over Thunderbolt. Now, to create one of these is a little bit more complex, but it will result in a more seamless experience, better efficiency, and higher performance. Here's how you do it. Again, if you're a Mac user, there may be a bit of a curveball later in this part of the video. Head back into the QNAP NAS. Remember, you're connected via Thunderbolt. Go in and this time select the option known as iSCSI and Fiber Channel. In iSCSI and Fiber Channel, you will need to create what's known as a iSCSI target. We're going to create a brand new target for the sake of this guide. We go ahead and create ourselves a new target. This target is ultimately a dedicated pathway to connect with the NAS, unlike the one that we're utilizing right now, although it's going to be over Thunderbolt that we're going to be connecting with this new storage. It's worth highlighting that this is parallel to anything else going on the system. Click Next and give it a name. In this case, we're going to call it TB Test. TB Test, as you can see, we've got advanced systems where we can do integrity checks if we choose, but just bear in mind they will dip the performance a tiny bit, but they will ensure that data is checked as it's passing through to ensure that it doesn't have any kind of corruption over the network as data is sent. Next, choose if you want to use CHAPS or ultimately authentication. It allows you to add another layer of access privilege control to this connection and therefore the data inside. From here, select which network adapter you want to use. In my case, the Thunderbolt connection, but you can use other adapters such as 10 gig and 25 gig connections if you choose. Then click Next, and then before you click Apply, make sure you put a tick in this box here. Click Apply. Because now you've established this new dedicated connection, the next thing you need to create is a LUN. Now a LUN is what these are. A LUN is that logical unit number of storage. Unlike the shared folder we created earlier on, which is more public and widely available storage, we need to create this dedicated block of storage in order to, for want of a better word, trick our Mac or Windows system into thinking this is a local drive. So now we're going to call this Share LUN. We choose just like before, which area of storage pool on the NAS we want to use, and it's recommended you go for the fastest area of storage. In my case, storage pool 3 that we worked out earlier. Then we decide how much of that storage space we want to use inside our new storage area. I'm going to give this 500 gigabytes of space. You can set it to the maximum capacity if you choose. If you go for thin provisioning, as mentioned, it will allocate that storage. Or if you use thick provisioning, the performance won't be as high, but it'll allow you to come up with theoretical numbers. So you could choose with thick provisioning if you wish, put in 5 million squillion terabytes. And that, or if you go ahead with terabytes, it will allow you to ensure that you can graduate that storage over time. It means that you can add data as and when you need it. And therefore, although you may not have that storage today, in thick provisioning, you can ensure that the larger storage area could theoretically be huge. You just need to add drives as you go. But for beginners, I recommend thin provisioning. Again, I'm going to go ahead and just create a 500 gigabyte storage area there. Next up, again, choose whether you want to use compression, deduplication. Do you want alerts for when the storage area reduces? Do you want to take advantage of SSD cache if you've got that enabled? And again, more on that if you go to the setup guides. And lastly, once again, choose that block size. You need to know what kind of data you're going to be using and then select the appropriate block size in order to get the best performance. And finally, go ahead if you choose to use encryption if you wish. I'm going to set that to video editing and then click create. As you can see, it's now going to create this new dedicated area of storage on its own dedicated connection. As you can see here, TB test, and there we are, our new shared LUN. Now this information, we now have to assign this to our system to create that logical drive. Earlier I mentioned that Mac users are going to be thrown a curveball here. That curveball is this. It's an iSCSI initiator. You need to use an iSCSI initiator in order to bridge the gap and trick your system into thinking this system is local storage over that Thunderbolt connection. So in the case of a Windows user, it's actually quite straightforward. Go ahead, go into the favorite targets, go into the Discovery tab. From there, select Discover Portal. From there, add this number up here, the address of our Thunderbolt connection. So if you don't know your Thunderbolt connection, you can find either going into QFinder and using that IP address there with the Thunderbolt symbol next to it. Alternatively, access the NAS remotely over the internet or network, go into the network adapter and find the IP of Thunderbolt, this one here. Take that number and put it into the iSCSI initiator, something I've already done. That means that once we make our way over to targets, new targets appear for us to use. Then from there we can go ahead and select that connected portal that we're using right now, and then from there go ahead and discover our new drives. Once you've connected to that drive, and it's really important that you go ahead and enable multipath on that drive, on your Windows system, go to the Start menu and write the word Disk Management and select Create and Format Hard Disk Partitions. Now automatically, that drive we created earlier, that LUN, should appear here. If it doesn't, there should be a black bar area here at the bottom where you can right click, take the drive online, and then assign the drive a letter and a path to initialize that area of storage. Doing so will ensure that once you've assigned that drive a letter, it will appear on your available list of drives here on your system, like so. And therefore, you will have a new drive on your local area storage. Again, I've skimmed over some of the details, and I strongly recommend that you utilize my video editing guide for more information on how to set up that iSCSI step by step, all the way through to the connection and multipath activation of those to get the very best possible performance for your drive. Now, again, if you are a Mac user, things are not that straightforward. Due to Mac's continued obstinance towards some third-party applications, and in particular using network drives other than their own cloud storage devices, they don't include a first-party iSCSI initiator. Depending on the Mac OS you're using, you will have to use a third-party application in order to mount that drive. But apart from that, it is still just as possible to mount an iSCSI drive via Thunderbolt on your Mac as it is on a Windows system. Now, at the moment, we've talked about two arguably more complex ways in which you will connect your Mac or Windows system to a Thunderbolt NAS. But what is the most seamless, easy, and background active way? What is the way in which your local system doesn't have to think or do any of this tech stuff? Well, that is where that third app I mentioned earlier on, QSync, comes into play. Make sure you've downloaded QSync and installed it on your local system. And this is the window you should see on your local system, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Head back into the QNAP NAS, go into the Application Center, go to the App Center and find the application called QSync. QSync, it's a free application, it's included. Go ahead and install that application. Then, once it's installed, click Open. Once it's open, it will invite you to create shared folders, team folders, and versioning control on those folders. Ultimately, what this app is doing is allowing you to create an area of shared space on this NAS that your client devices, your Android phone, your iOS phone, your Windows machine, your Android desktop machine, or your Mac to communicate with, and with cross-platform communication as well. And all of this could be conducted both on Thunderbolt and remotely via the internet. So go ahead and create either going into a shared folder and find a folder that you've already created, for example, like the shared test folder we created earlier on. And again, once you've done so, enable it to have granted access within QSync. And what that will do is that shared folder we created earlier now can be communicated remotely. But on top of that, you can edit some of the credentials for that folder quite significantly with regards to which users can access it, whether they've got read and write access, and more. On top of that, once you come out of that, you can also create team folders, and team folders dedicated to QSync will be folders that you use to be shared across all of your devices. So while that you, the Thunderbolt editor, are connecting over Thunderbolt, users that are connected via the internet or via the network can also access this folder to work on the projects that you're working on remotely, perhaps to package them or distribute them and share them. So for now, that's what QSync is. But on top of that, don't forget that you can use versioning control to allow that any work that you do on the data inside this folder is a record is kept that you can reverse to when needed, and with file locking supported as well, and maximum version control all built in. It's a great little tool for all of that. Now, moving away from the NAS UI here in the web browser, let's head back into that app we installed earlier on. Now, once again, make sure you're connected over Thunderbolt, but also bear in mind that all the steps that we're doing right now will work outside of Thunderbolt. Either use the search NAS functionality to search the local area network for the NAS, of which you'll have to give permission, in which case, as you can see, it has found the NAS IP, the Thunderbolt one. Remember to double check for the Thunderbolt one that you need to go in on the network adapter there, double check the interfaces and select Thunderbolt, or once again, as mentioned earlier, go into QFinder and double check that this is the address that's got the Thunderbolt symbol next to it. Come out of it there, go back in to the QSync application, select the NAS in question that's got the Thunderbolt connection, then click select. Then enter the credentials you created to access this NAS. Once again, ensure that you're using the account that you created in order to only use it for video editing and not give too much control. Then click next. It will ask you to enter the password, and if you're using two-factor authentication, go ahead and enter those credentials there as well. And from here, ask it, you're synchronizing a folder on the NAS and a folder on your local Mac or Windows machine. So, in the case of the folder on the NAS, select Add, select the folder, and there's Share Test, the one that we gave QSync access to. If we wish, if it has multiple folders inside, we can break down even further, but click Add. Then, on the local machine, that is the Windows or Mac system, click the folder and select which folder on your PC you want to communicate with. You can either create a brand new folder if you choose and not use up any of the folders on your machine already. So for example, I can head over to the desktop on my Windows machine, click the desktop there and create a brand new folder and call this one QNAP Share Test. Go ahead and click OK. Or I could have used an existing folder if I choose. For that, select Selective Synchronization. From there, say if you want to use space saving mode. Space saving mode allows you to see the contents of the NAS without actually holding all of the data. More on that later on, but for now, I'll click Enter. I click Apply and that enabled. But bear in mind that when using space saving mode, that if you delete data on the PC with space saving mode enabled, that can result in data being deleted on the NAS. But it does have advantages and disadvantages that I recommend you read up on, but it will also tell you during the installation of QSync. Click Apply, and as you can see, we've now connected those two folders, and by default there will always be a QSync folder located on your machine as soon as you install the software, as you can see there. But for now, go ahead and click Finish, and it will invite you to know that by default all the different files are going to be synchronized. But you're not going to want to do that because sometimes that can be quite messy. But right now, we've now synchronized these two folders on the NAS and my local system. That means here, as you can see, my local system, I can either go in to QSync right here and find QNAP Share Test, the folder, or if I choose to, I can go ahead, head to the desktop of my Windows machine, and boom, there is QNAP Share Test, the folder we created earlier on my Windows machine, I should say. So for example, if we go ahead and drag and drop these folders on the NAS, so let's go into File Station here, we can find our QSync folder, and it will list what's available if we refresh that list there. On top of that, we can go into QSync here and manage our folders that we've created and manage the connections between them and the devices. But probably the most important thing of all is it allows us to now interact with this NAS over Thunderbolt using our native operating system. So there is the QNAP Share Test. And if I wish, let's open that up in a new folder. Let's go ahead and grab all of these files, copy them, go into QNAP Share Test, paste them in, and they're on there. But do you see those little green ticks? If we zoom in a little bit there, you're able to see that there's these green ticks. That means that the data is on, I can access that data live on my system. But these are the two files that we uploaded to that folder earlier on. If we right click them, we can see that although those files are just 65 kilobits in size, they're taking no size up on my local Windows machine. That means with that local machine that if I had, for example, 4K edited files and I had a year's worth of recordings on the NAS, I would be able to see that all those files are on the NAS. But if I need those files locally, all I've got to do is right click, go to one of the context options to share the file with people locally or on the internet, copy the file to another location on the NAS or locally on the machine, or in space saving mode, always keep a copy of this file or free up space. So as you can see, always keep a copy on this device, click that, and boom, that file is now locally on my machine at all times, and it can never go. But say these files, for example, I think, I'm done with those now, I want rid of them on my local machine to save space. Why, right click, go into space saving mode, free up space. And now those files are no longer on my PC. They're gone, they're only stored on the NAS, and it's that straightforward. And all of this is being conducted over Thunderbolt using my native file system. And that's about it. Connecting with the NAS over Thunderbolt is pretty much the same as connecting over the local area network or remotely. It's just a far more convenient way to do it, connecting a cable point to point between your Mac and Windows system and the QNAP NAS. But bear in mind, you can even edit over 10 GBE. Detailed more in my video here. It talks through how to set up your network configuration right for the first time and allow you to edit directly on the NAS over not just Thunderbolt, but over a 1 gig, 10 gig and 25 gig network if you choose to, with further recommendations. I'll link to this video in the description. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you need further assistance on configuring a QNAP NAS over Thunderbolt, or indeed any NAS advice, head over to NAS Compares, and on the right hand side of every page you can take advantage of the free advice section. The free advice section over at NAS Compares here will allow you to ultimately get what the name is on the tin: free advice from myself and Eddie, as well as recommendations for other places to get advice. If you need it quicker though, you can take advantage of expedited support via Ko-Fi if you wish, and via Ko-Fi services get expedited next day support, or hire me for a Zoom consultation for me to walk through the options with you and give you guidance on the solution for your needs. Alternatively, heading back to NAS Compares, if you're unsure of the system you need right now, and you're not even sure if you need a Thunderbolt NAS, go to the NAS Builder tool. On the NAS Builder tool, you can head into this tool and start looking at what you need for your storage. So for example, if you need a 4-bay NAS system, you need 4 terabytes, or say 40 terabytes of storage, you're going to be buying an 8-bay NAS, the icon will appear there. You need to have 1 disk of failsafe, and you don't want to spend any more than perhaps $1,000. Then on top of that, choose what kind of editing you want to go for. So if you want to go for 4K editing, I would recommend maybe spending a little bit more, but it's up to you. Then down there, say how many people are going to be connecting with it at any given time. Say what your methodology of connection is. Perhaps it's Thunderbolt, perhaps it's 1 gig, or perhaps it's 10 gig. After that, choose if you need any other further features, such as mixing drives, but apart from that, click Find, and it will list if any drives and NASs are available. If you get no results, go ahead and play with some of the parameters you went for earlier on, and ultimately this will help you find the best NAS for your needs. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.